It's just one of those days where you don't want to wake up. Everything is... Wait, that's not right. Everything isn't forked in the world of PC gaming, where GPU prices are finally coming down, which makes it so that if you've been holding out to build a gaming PC, then now isn't too bad a time. Where today, we're going to be putting together a beast gaming PC for a little over 1100 USD, and it's going to be featuring the latest Intel 12th gen i5-12400F and also the RTX 2080 Super, which for the RTX 2080 Super, this graphics card is a very good pick if you're looking for decent value for money, since crypto miners are not really going to be targeting this card, and also crypto miners aren't buying up GPUs like they were last year. So this means that it's finally a decent time to start building PCs. So let's see what we got on the table here and then put it together, tune it all up, and then see how it performs in games.
Are you tired of seeing this annoying activate Windows message? Then if so, today's video sponsor SCD Keys has you covered. For as little as $14 using the coupon code BFTYC, you can get activated today. Works for Windows 11 Pro too. Links in the description below.
Welcome back to Tech Yes City, and everything in today's video is going to be new parts except for the graphics card. This is the RTX 2080 Super, really good pick if you want to buy a used graphics card for a decent price. But if you want to get a new graphics card, then the AMD cards have actually dropped a lot more than the Nvidia cards on the new market. So if you want to go all new, then something like an RX 6600 is going to be a decent buy to get still decent value for money. But I'll put all the prices for the parts up on the screen here for you guys, so you can get a bit of an indicator on if you want to build something similar to this on what you should be paying. I'll also put some links in the description below. But with that aside, let's start undervolting the CPU and tuning the graphics card to get the lowest power consumption possible and also the best FPS. So after completing this build, we've installed Windows and we've also gone into the BIOS and locked in our 3200 MHz XMP profiles on the memory. However, there is a little bit of a fork in our plan here to bring the power consumption down, especially on the CPU. When it came to the graphics card, we managed to drop the power consumption down considerably to the point where we'll show you the results first, and then I'll show you guys how to do it. Where if we were running Unigine Heaven Benchmark, which is a basic benchmark that's free to download, it's very quick to get up and running, we could see from the wall this whole build in total was using 376 watts power consumption. But after we started tuning up the CPU, we managed to tune this up a minuscule amount, and also for the GPU, we tuned this up greatly with MSI Afterburner. We dropped down the power consumption all the way down to 268 watts. That's over 108 watts savings from the wall, and we're pretty much getting very similar performance. I'll pull up some before and after benchmark numbers before we did the undervolting and then after we did the undervolting. And what we got here was out of the box, CPU in TimeSpy, we got 8,410 points and then 8,492. So the CPU actually went up slightly after doing this, and then the GPU went from 11,583 points down to 11,125. So we didn't even lose 5% performance, but we're dropping the whole power consumption of this build down 33%. And it was a similar story with Firestrike Extreme, where the CPU scores were pretty much identical, and then the GPU score dropped down from 13,500-ish down to 13,058. So the benefits of undervolting, not only are we going to be saving power, in this case 108 watts, say for instance we're gaming for 10 hours, that's going to be 1 kilowatt hour roughly. That's going to save us in Australia around 20 cents. So if we're gaming for 50 hours, that's $1. So every 50 hours that we game on this PC, we're saving $1 just by undervolting. And so over the course of a year, you could even save $50 by doing this little trick that we've done here today. So now we're at that point where you're like, Brian, you've showed us the results. I want to know how to undervolt this particular graphics card. And the RTX 2080 Super is very easy to undervolt. You just have to download a program called MSI Afterburner, and then while you've got that program installed and up and running, I want you to then hit on your keyboard Control F, and this will bring up the curve editor. And then we can hold Shift, left click our mouse on one of these dot points, and then drag it down to 1800 megahertz roughly. And then at around 825 millivolts, we grab that point, hold left click, and we drag it all the way up to 1800, and in this case, 1810 megahertz. And then we go back to the MSI program and we click the tick, and then we can save that as a profile and we're good to go. That's the main component of undervolting, but also since your graphics card is running cooler, we can also afford to up the memory speeds. In this case, this RTX 2080 Super, we got an extra 400 megahertz on the memory, so you can feel free to try and copy my settings if you've got an RTX 2080 Super, and then you should be having much better power consumption as well as a much cooler graphics card. Though as for the CPU, the 12400F, the motherboard didn't have a whole lot of voltage options in it to undervolt the CPU. And then also when we went to Windows, we couldn't install that Intel Extreme Utility application because Intel haven't added in support. So I would like to see Intel add in support for that application with the 12400F. Then at a later date, we can come back and undervolt the 12400F, especially with this motherboard right here. Though speaking of something that is not going to wait for a later date, that is the gaming benchmark numbers, where I'm going to start in 2022. I believe this is probably one of the first budget builds I've done this year because it's finally a decent time going forward to build PCs. I'm actually going to start putting up value charts for you guys, and you can see which builds have performed to what FPS and the value you're going to get there going forward. So if you want to build a high-end PC, you can say, okay, am I going to be paying a mad premium for it, or am I going to be getting a pretty good deal? But let's get those gaming benchmark numbers done and then come back to it.
Throwing frag. Placing gas trap. Reloading. Subject down. Fuel reserve. SLS. Clear.
해결했다.
على استعداد لبعض العمل.
ماذا لديك لأفعل؟ على استعداد لبعض.
ماذا لديك لأفعل؟
حان وقت العمل.
الكمان راكب الأرض. الكمان راكبا الآن. أحمل جهز الأسلحة.
ماذا لديك لأفعل؟
جميعا وقتنا.
And after all those benchmarks are finished, we have an absolute winning formula here with this gaming PC. And what we saw with the undervolting was the temperatures on the GPU and the CPU were remaining quite low in games. And this is summer where I live here. So basically in Australia, we're the opposite of the rest of the world where it's winter. So your temperatures would be really cold if you were using this exact same gaming PC in the same settings. But let's go through some of the FPS that we got in these titles, where I'm going to add up all the FPS in the end, and I'm going to put it into a value chart. But what we did here with these 4 games, we tested Age of Empires 4, we tested Call of Duty Cold War, tested Fortnite at epic settings, and then we tested on the last game, we had Apex Legends, and I played Arena. And so I'm going to test the same map and the same max settings when I do other gaming PCs this year, and then add up the total average FPS and then divide it by the dollar amount. And that'll give you the FPS per dollar on these rigs that we're producing here. So say for instance, you want to build something under $1,000, you see the value for money it presents, and maybe it's worth it to get that little bit extra and go for a higher end build. That's what these charts are going to tell us. So this PC right here did perform with over 4 FPS per dollar, which is really good in the grand scheme of things. And considering the FPS it was pulling in all these titles, it was an absolutely smooth experience at 1080p. And this is max settings. So of course, if you want some more FPS out of these games, you can lower the settings. But it is ultimately a PC that will deliver the goods, and it also has the blink to match. Now, for me personally, I'm using these budget cases with 4 RGB fans. And as you saw in games, the temperatures that we're seeing here are absolutely fine. So you don't have to go out and spend big money on a case, unless of course you're probably going with like an i9 12900K, 3080 Ti or 6800 XT, and you need to get the best airflow to go through that case. But all the components we used in today's build are great value choices, and it finally marks a time in PC gaming where it's actually not a bad idea to finally go out and build a PC. I think all of 2021 was very painful. If you guys were looking to build a gaming PC last year, there was even one of my viewers who asked me about his Vega 64 and what should he do. And I just told him to simply sell the Vega 64 last year for a ridiculously high price and just wait till the graphics cards come down. Now he would have been waiting a few months, but at least that money, if he sold that Vega 64 then, he can now buy a much better card even with the same amount of money. So that's kind of where the graphics card market is going. It's looked like it was tapped out last year. The miners just kept piling on. They just wanted to keep getting more graphics cards and more graphics cards. But now they're getting to a stage where the crypto is going down, the profitability is going down, but also even some of the, I think the Ethereum developers were coming out at the start of the year and just saying, look, we're moving to proof of stake really soon. So if you're looking at buying more graphics cards for mining, I wouldn't buy any more personally. And that's what they were saying. So they were sort of giving the big time miners the signal that proof of work mining is going to drop off. And that's a really good thing for gamers. So it seems like when the crypto market's doing bad now, the gaming market is going to start doing good. So hopefully, fingers crossed, these prices do remain subdued and they keep going down for graphics cards. And this is going to bring back enthusiasm, at least to the PC gaming world, the enthusiast tech world, which has been sorely missed in 2021. Honestly, 2021, I was just walking around like, oh man, we just got to look high and low constantly. Like the deals hunting was excruciatingly hard last year. I had to go everywhere to recycling yards and all these other places to try and get really good deals. And in the end, I was getting good deals, but it wasn't like 2020, especially before the whole crypto mining boom, where you could go on Marketplace and you could just get a good deal. Or you go on your local Gumtree or your local sort of used deals marketplace and you get a pretty good deal on something. And that just wasn't the case for graphics cards. And it wasn't even the case for a lot of other parts too. There was just so many people looking for used parts because the miners had pushed the prices up of the GPUs, and sort of that scaled on to everything else in the market, where we saw the likes of, say, AMD with their Ryzen 5000 series chips. They were just charging a lot more money because they could. And so this year it looks like there's a bit of a balance on the scales, and hopefully the printers, they're pretty much turning off right now. So in America, the Federal Reserve's turning off the printers, and hopefully now they start reversing. And I know it's a hard concept to imagine, but it's called quantitative tightening. And that's when they actually start, the Federal Reserve starts selling the assets on their balance sheet and taking cash out of the economy. So if that happens, then all these big, Dogecoin going to the moon type high flyers out there and, go buy a picture of an ape and all that stuff, that's going to go down with that line. That's if that happens. Of course, it looks like it is going to happen, but there's always, and I said this to all my viewers out there, always be quick on your toes to know the information. I'll be helping you guys out on the channel here, telling you what's going on, when to react. But for the time being, if you've been hanging out to build a gaming PC, then now is a decent time and you're not going to lose a whole lot more. Say for instance, if prices do come down, then a build like this is already a pretty solid price, where you're going to get really good performance for the dollar. Anyhow, guys, with that aside, I hope you enjoyed today's budget build. We've got another one coming with pretty much all used stuff. It's going to be a used Ryzen 5 first gen and also an RTX 2060, and we'll add that into the charts. And as we go through this year, we'll even add in things like a laptop, for instance, and see how that stacks up against the gaming PCs. And hopefully you guys will start enjoying the new builds that we bring to the channel this year, and hopefully a bit more excitement starts coming back into Enthusiast Tech. If you guys stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Yes content, be sure to hit that like button. Also let us know in the comment section below what you think of today's build, and also if there's things that you would change out personally, then do let us know what you would change out and why. As for the stock Intel cooler, it is okay in games, but if you were doing heavy work on this and you were going for, say, 32 or 64 gigabytes of RAM with the 12400F, would highly recommend changing the cooler over. And also, if you had a bit more money, I would suggest perhaps just getting an M.2 SSD, 1 or 2 terabytes, as they are pretty cheap nowadays, and then just getting rid of the drives altogether. So that'd be the two things that I would change if I had a bit more money. But of course, I do like to keep it on a budget. I do like to give you guys choices as well, especially if you're just a gamer and you're getting into it. This build will be really good. Anyhow, guys, do drop us a comment down below. Love reading those thoughts and opinions. As always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from Marcus Salangi, and they ask, do you ever flash BIOS to newest when you get these old things to work? And they're talking about the previous video that we did with the $100 flip up challenge, which is an exciting new series. It's definitely going to deliver this year. I'm going to make sure of that, and I'll put the link to that video up here. But in this series, we got the motherboard, which was just absolutely filthy. We got this to work again. And so would I reflash the BIOS on this motherboard, even though I didn't in that video? And the answer is yes, definitely yes. On older parts, it's definitely worth reflashing the BIOS just to get it up to date, where in the past I have had experience with certain motherboards and a thing that I personally think is called bit rot, and that's where the BIOS just needs to be reflashed, because over time the integrity of the data on the BIOS chip itself has rotted away. So I definitely do recommend reflashing the BIOS. But of course, before you do that, do make sure the computer is in the BIOS and it's been running for a few minutes and it's not going to crash when you do that BIOS update. Hope that answers that question, and I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. If you stayed this far and you're enjoying that content, be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out for now. Bye.